And to be racist is to constantly deny the racial inequities that pervade American society, to constantly deny the racist ideas that pervade American minds. And so I want to build a just and equitable society. And the only way we're going to even begin that process is if we admit our racism and start building an anti-racist world.
At times, it's hard to know whether to interpret Kendi's arguments as factual claims subject to empirical scrutiny, or as diary entries to be accepted as personal truths. Having matured out of his anti-white phase, Kendi takes a refreshingly strong stand against anti-white racism in the book, rejecting the fashionable argument that blacks can't be racist because we lack power. He reflects with embarrassment on his old beliefs, avoiding condescension by lecturing his former self instead of the reader.
All right, so hello everyone. Welcome to American Shade. I'm Brittany King, your host. Today I'm going to be talking about the renowned professor from BU, Kendi, and I'm going to be talking about the journalists of Quillette and City Journal, Coleman Hughes. So the reason why I'm doing this video is because I have seen and have heard on Twitter, social media, in the public sphere, everywhere, public square, that Kendi's been getting a lot of pushback on his anti-racism work, and I haven't really heard him talk about the critique. So me wanting to believe that Kendi is coming from a sincere point of view, I haven't really been allowing that critique that I've been hearing take over my point of view of his work and who he is until I get my own objective idea of this person. So I have been attending many Zoom meetings that he's paneled or lectured. I have been going back and listening to some YouTube speeches that I've heard before, but really listening to them within the context of criticism that he's been facing. Also, I've revisited some of his prose, some of his writings. I have his book Stamp. I've been reading that, and I have realized there's a lot of issues within his work. I'm not going to say all of it is 100% off, but there's enough to raise eyebrows. So one specific Zoom meeting that I attended, and it was over W.E.B. Du Bois and his philosophy on Black liberation, and Kendi was giving a speech about that. This event was hosted by the Hutchins Center, and on the panel was Cornel West, and he's someone that I admire and I love completely. But during the end of the Zoom, they allowed the audience to ask questions via Q&A chat. So I asked a question as myself, and then I asked two anonymous questions because I wanted them to answer them all, and I didn't want them just to pick one of mine, and they answered all my questions. The first question that I asked was an anonymous one, and I wanted to know how Kendi felt about the critiques he's been getting from people like John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry. And does he see that they have, valid points? Does he see that some of the things that he says in regards to racism and anti-racism actually kind of backfires on the Black community and positions us in a spot where it almost seems like we're helpless against systematic racism and it's nothing that we can really liberate ourselves from? That's some of the critique that they've given, and that's something I've noticed with Kendi's work. I asked that, and then they lumped in my other question that I had as my name. So that question was that I asked. I started off with saying that I was a former Black Lives Matter leader in Indiana, and that I heard about Coleman Hughes' open letter to Kendi, and I was wondering if Kendi was going to take Hughes up on this offer. and that not only would it be a great dialogue to have with two Black intellectuals, but it could be an example for the future generations to come to see two Black men, two Black writers, two Black intellectuals, like I mentioned, debating and having civil discourse in a public conversation about their opposing views about race, racism, and anti-racism. I was shocked by his answers. I knew some of them might have been irritating for him to hear, but I was kind of shocked by what he said. And this is what he said. In regards to the anonymous question that I asked about John McWhorter, specifically, and Glenn Lowry, he more honed in on McWhorter and said that, and I quote, "Of course McWhorter would critique my work because he holds racist ideas." And he basically said racist ideas against the Black community. And I literally, my mouth like fell open. Obviously he can't see me on the Zoom, but I was just like, oh my gosh. And then he went on and said, and I don't even believe these men have read my work, because if they have, they wouldn't be having these type of critiques. And I'm not going to really respond to them, because I'll be responding to the misrepresentation of my work and not my work itself. So basically, if that doesn't answer the second question, if he would take Hughes up on a public conversation, I kind of knew the answer to that by his first answer. And he said that he would want to debate the misrepresentation of his work, of Kendi's work, and not Kendi's work. Kendi said that he has seen and read some of the critiques that Hughes has written in the past year or so, and believes that he also has not read his work, and believes that he's just completely misrepresented him and his anti-racist historian findings. I really wish that that Zoom was recorded for public release. I've been searching for it and I haven't found it, and I wish I would have recorded at least that portion of him answering my questions. Didn't. But what I'm saying is true. Like I wouldn't get on and make a video and if it's not true. It's true. But the reason why I asked that question to Kendi about having an open debate with Coleman Hughes is, yes, they have opposing views, but Kendi is someone that's a best-selling author. He won a National Book Award, and he has a big, huge following. If Kendi was just someone who wrote something and had a bunch of errors, but no one was taking him seriously, it's still problematic. But if no one believes you, or they are not, taking stake in what you're saying, then whatever. But the fact that people are listening to Kendi, hold him up to this high regard as a leader of anti-racism. The National Review even titled him as the prophet of anti-racism. That's a big title to give somebody that's only 37 years old. And I mean, he hasn't even really lived through, he hasn't lived through the civil rights era. So it's like, how can this 37-year-old finally have the cure to anti-racism? And he's kind of a baby to it. Not to say I'm not, I'm 31, I'm younger than him. But I know a lot of historians and philosophers and writers and authors. You can even say Cornel West is one that would never, I don't think would ever want that title on them, or would ever position their work as something as like biblical. Like he is a race god, and that is dangerous not only for the people following him, but for him. You're human, and if you fail, which you might, and there are failures in your work, and it's fine, you're human, but you should be open to critique. And it makes me suspicious on why, if someone has misrepresented your work, why wouldn't you want to hold a public debate and call them out, if anything? So this is my, backing, I guess, of Coleman Hughes's call for an open debate. No, I'm not biased to Kendi or Hughes. I respect Hughes and his work, and I have a weird hope for Kendi that he will come out of this cloud of being this invincible man who has been lauded up into a place where I feel it's just way too high for him. And I kind of feel, I don't want to be like, oh, I feel bad for him, like it's like I'm being patronizing. I'm not. I feel like even if he makes a mistake, or even if he does see a flaw in what he has done or said, and maybe he does see like McWhorter or Hughes or Lowry might be right about something, I don't know if he would feel comfortable to come out and say it, because he might feel that if I do, then everyone's going to think everything that I've come up with is flawed. And it's not to say that all the critiques that Kendi's been getting is right, but the fact that you've been getting so much critique, wouldn't you want to take a step back and be like, have I missed something? I mean, if the goal is Black liberation and the goal is to have an anti-racist world, and someone's pointing out, okay, I understand this is your goal, but I'm seeing some missteps. Like, what about this? What about that? And you're like, no, they haven't read my work. No, if they read my work, they wouldn't think that way. Like, that is not an intellectual to me. An intellectual is someone who is always a student and is always willing to learn, and who does not think that they're above anyone or critique. So with that said, I'm going to play a portion of Coleman Hughes's video that he just released, titled An Open Letter to Ibram X. Kendi. Also, he reads one of his essays that he wrote in 2019, which is a critique of Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Hughes's critique is called How to Be an Anti-Intellectual. I have read that essay, and it points out just undeniable things, flaws in Kendi's findings with just basic history. And I don't mean that to, again, sound condescending, biased, whatever. This is an objective thing. I've just looked at it and I've been like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Or yeah, that's been twisted. But I'm not going to sit up here and tell you how to think. I would watch his video in full, read that essay in full, or you can listen to the essay, because he reads the entire thing in this next video I'm about to play. So here we go.
I'd like to read an open letter that I wrote to Kendi in the hopes of having a conversation with him. So here's that letter. Dear Professor Kendi, I'm writing you this letter in the hopes that you and I can have a public conversation. As you know, the current moment has seen a renewed focus on the issues of racism and inequality. On these topics, your writing has proved hugely influential. As I write this, How to Be an Anti-Racist has spent 30 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list, and Stamped from the Beginning has spent 19. The more your ideas spread, the more they elicit both praise and criticism. My own view falls in the latter category. I've offered criticisms of your work, and I've put forward an alternative vision, which is why I believe a conversation between us, in the spirit of genuine truth-seeking, would be fruitful. Many people pay attention to each of us because we represent widely held but importantly different visions for how the nation, and ultimately the world, should address the issues of race and racism. As a result, many in our respective audiences, as well as people who see elements of truth in both of our perspectives, would welcome this conversation. As an initial suggestion, I'm offering my podcast, Conversations with Coleman, as a venue. If you prefer a different venue, I'd be happy to accommodate. To move us all toward a beneficial cause, I've set up a GoFundMe page. Anyone who wants to see this conversation happen can donate, and all the proceeds raised will go to the United Negro College Fund, whether or not you choose to accept my invitation. That said, I hope you do choose to accept the invitation, which I offer humbly and in the spirit of truth-seeking. Best, Coleman Hughes.
And I must make a mention of this, and I believe it was in Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist book, he said that he admits to having past anti-whiteness racism in him, and how he used to see white people as aliens, I believe it was, and that he's come out of that and now he's like fully just anti-racist, which is great, you know, growth. So with that said, he's basically admitting that Black people can hold racist ideas like any other racial group, and that he used to be one of those Black people. Recently, this past month, he tweeted out something really, I would just say, objectively tactless about the Supreme Court Judge Amy. And he basically said, let me get the receipt so I can read verbatim. He said, some white coloners adopted Black children. They civilized these savage children in the superior way of white people, while using them as props in their lifelong pictures of denial, while cutting the biological parents of these children out of the picture of humanity. I mean, good Lord. First off, I mean, it was just, obviously this is when the court hearings were happening and she was being selected, Amy was being selected for Supreme Court judge, and she was getting, you know, interviewed and all this stuff. And, you know, people have their opinions. I'm not here to say whether I'm for her or not. That's not the point. Also, disclaimer, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I'm an independent. So I am not biased with political parties. I do not affiliate as on the right or left. Period. These are objective claims. But that, I tweeted out something, and I might show it here somewhere if I find it, but I basically said, Kendi, this is objectively this is a disgusting tweet. You don't know her. Like, you know of her by media. You know of her by how the Democrats talk about her, how the left talk about her. I'm not saying it. Some of this might be true, some of it might not be true. But to say, basically call her a white colonizer and like using her Haitian children to not look racist, but in a way where just that tweet alone is problematic. It just shows how you really see yourself as the bishop of anti-racism, that you could say something like this as if it's true. I will admit I have reservations with some white people adopting Black children, whether America or, you know, abroad, only because even if we're trying to get to a world where we are judging people by the content of their character, right now that's not where we are. And these children are going to be judged by their color, period. So when they grow up in a white family, they will not necessarily consider themselves white, because they will obviously see the difference between skin colors, but they might not understand their history, their heritage, their lineage. Not to say that you have to be like, you were a slave and you were this and this. Be oppressed. Like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying like a white mom and dad can provide shelter, love, great parents, and I am all for that. If you want to adopt any children, I'm for it. I am just I just get concerned of, do you have some type of resource, family member, friend, where they'll be able to talk to them, and I'm saying a Black person, a Black friend, even like even an organization that they can be a part of with other Black children and other children, but just, you know, where they can talk about their experience of being Black. Not anything that they should build a complex over, like, oh, I'm Black and I can't do this. But, you know, if something comes up about this little girl or boy's, you know, color, and they're being picked on because they're Black, or they're being or they call it the N-word or whatever. That this like that talk can be had with their white parents, but it's different when they're not, they don't understand the experience. And that's all I'm saying. Like, just have someone there where if things like that happen, they'll have someone to talk to, and not feel like they have to hold it in, pent it up, have a weird complex about their identity because they're in a family that doesn't share their identity. Like, that will just make them thrive within the white family and make that family even stronger. That's actually the best way to go about it, until we get to a place where people are just judging by the content of the character. But anyway, I digress. So he made that tweet. I made a tweet about his tweet. And he could have pointed out then and been like, you know what, guys, I messed up. This my tweet right here is an example of racism. And what I'm going to do right now is an example of being an anti-racist. I am going to admit my faults. Amy, I apologize. I'm sorry to you and your family and your children. And that actually would have bode well with the Twitter community. But it would have just made you seem more human, made your whole idea of being racist and anti-racist even seem more attainable, because the person that wrote the book literally just did it and just showed you how not to be racist. Kendi didn't do that. Kendi said he made a couple of tweets saying, when they hate you, you know, don't pay attention to the people that critique you, or not critique you. Don't pay attention to the people that hate you, or say things about your character. Rise above it, basically. When they go low, I go high type thing. I'll put that tweet here. Hopefully I can find it. He deleted some of the tweets. And then he made a couple more tweets like that. And I was just like, this is when I really started to get, you know, my side eye on Kendi, because I'm like, I think he thinks that he can't be talked to. It was almost like, how dare you guys talk to me? Like, how dare you point out racism to the man who wrote The Cure? It's like, you're literally a baby. I'm not going to attack him. All I'm saying is, I'm trying to be funny, hopefully. Another interesting thing I found, because I've been watching a lot of YouTube lectures, like I said, and I watched a lecture that he had with two other women, and towards the end, Kendi basically, I mean, ironically and unbeknownst to him, calls himself out on his own behavior. They were talking about cancel culture, and here's that clip.
And, you know, to this point of challenging, we have another question from Miriam Mohit in our community, who asks, how do you see cancel culture and anti-racism interacting? For example, when someone did something obviously racist in the past and it comes to light. How do we respond to that?
Wow. So I think it's very, very complex. I do obviously encourage people to transform themselves, to change, to admit those times in which they were being racist. And so obviously we as a community have to give people that ability to do that. You know, we can't, when someone admits that they were being racist, we can't immediately obviously cancel them. But I also think that there are people who do something so egregious, and there are people who are so unwilling to recognize how egregious what they just did is. So in a particular moment, so not just the horrible, vicious act, but then on top of that, the refusal to even admit the horrible, vicious act. In that case, I could see how people would literally want to cancel them. And I think that we have to, on the other hand, we have to have some sort of consequence, public consequence, cultural consequence for people acting in a racist manner, especially in an extremely egregious way. And for many people, they've decided, you know what, I'm just going to cancel folks. And I'm not going to necessarily critique them, but I do think we should try to figure out a way to discern those who are refusing to transform themselves and those who made a mistake and recognized it and truly are committed to transforming themselves.
So basically, Kendi calls himself out and says that if someone makes a mistake, that they need to own up to it and that no one's above the pale. Kendi, I think that's his time. And that's why I am advocating for this discourse. And I want to say a big disclaimer, because people are like, oh, you just want this because you want Hughes to embarrass Kendi. No, I don't. I think a great quality dialogue could happen where two great minds who have opposing views on our race problem could honestly chisel down and find truth in each other's work and maybe walk away with something we all can actually strive toward. I really think that's the point of two people talking. It's not to fight or win. It's to see, okay, what have I been missing? What can I learn? And how can we collect the great true parts of our point of view to make something that will help everyone involved, being us, Americans. And I want to say that I've been on my own journey with critical thinking. I just graduated from NYU with my master's in journalism, concentrated in criticism, and I actually recently came out with an article titled The Black Free Thought, and it was published in Tablet magazine, and it's reached a lot of people on Twitter. I checked the analytics. It's reached like almost 240,000 people, and so many people have reached out to me, all races, creeds, religions, and it's really like touched people in a way where I'm just thankful for. In that essay, I talk about a moment where I was watching the HR 40 congressional hearing between Ta-Nehisi Coates and Coleman Hughes. And Coates was actually my former professor at NYU, and I still love Coates, and I think he's a great writer, and he's helped me so much with my writing. In that essay, I talked about basically calling Coleman a coon because he was against reparations. Now that I have been on my journey with critical thinking, I revisited that congressional hearing months ago, 6 months ago maybe, saw, actually longer than that, but anyway, and watched it over and over and over and over and over again, and I was kind of like shocked that I even thought Hughes was a coon for disagreeing with Coates. And I realized the first time I watched it, I was watching Hughes and I was listening to Coates because I already made my decision on who won just based on who they were. But the other times, which was like 20, 30 other times, I was listening to both of them and I realized I believed both of them. I believed Coates was, I put in an essay, eloquently accurate, and Hughes was controversially truthful. Hughes wasn't necessarily saying that, no, he wasn't saying, he was not saying that we don't deserve reparations. He was making a case for why it could harm us. But Coates was making the case that we deserve reparations, and he had a list of why, and said because we've been harmed. Both, to me, like I mentioned before, in other interviews, are right. He actually shared that essay on Twitter, Coleman Hughes did, and I thought that was really awesome. And that type of stuff is what we need, and that's why I'm such a big proponent for this discussion, because you don't have to become an enemy. You might even start to like the other person and then really understand where that person's coming from. But one major line that I had in that whole essay, which I will have the link below if you want to read the entire thing, and which is something that a lot of people have been pointing out and saying, like, this is a couple of sentences that's really stuck with them. I said that there's a difference between millions of minds attaching to an idea versus millions of thoughts critically agreeing with an idea. And what I think is happening right now is millions of minds, meaning by which I mean millions of Americans who really want to solve our race issue. They're attaching themselves to Kendi's belief system that has flaws, and they're not critically looking at it, because I think people are just so desperate for change that they are seeing this person that's lauded in society, and by any means necessary, and I quote Malcolm X, they want to believe that this is the way out. And not many people are critically looking at this. But I know by my interactions with Coleman, someone I called a coon and even anti-black, who I realized was not, and who I just have disagreed with on certain things, is not looking to embarrass Kendi. I believe he just really wants to be like, you know, I've been critiquing your stuff for about, I think, a year or two. Let's just talk about it. Like, let's stop, like, with the Twitter stuff, and let's just speak. What's the harm? There's no harm in talking about it. And Kendi, if you do feel like you've been misrepresented, again, defend it and call Coleman out if you feel that way. I mean, there's nothing to be afraid of. So if you want to see this debate, like I do, reshare this video. Also, go and watch Coleman's video in full and share that. Share the letter that he says is available on a website, and he has it in that video. And really get the word out. And don't be like calling Kendi like, you little whatever. No, there's no need for that. Just, if anything, if you do tweet it out in the most civil way. There's no need, there's no one, this is not a Mike Tyson, whoever fight. Floyd Mayweather, I don't know references for wrestlers. I don't know many. But this isn't that. This is not fight. This is just like, let's see them talk and speak. But this is 2020. Like, no more fighting, guys. We fought so much. I have a couple of months left. No more fighting. Just let's talk. Let's talk. So all the links will be in the description. Thank you for watching, and be safe.